Okay, this is a step up for sure.
Those were up, and they did.
We're smart, and my...
He told me enough.
No, I.
Here's Chuck.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. And this movie review is going to be for a release that came out on Labor Day weekend. And it's a film that pretty much been the last blockbuster to wrap up the summer 2023 season and wrap up summer 2023 as well. And wrapping up a crappy summer movie season, easily a crappy one. And that film is going to be for the third installment of this series and final installment of the series I'm reviewing. And that film is going to be for none other than this weekend's The Equalizer 3, which is directed, obviously, again by Antoine Fuqua. So, what's the plot of this movie? Well, ever since The Equalizer 2, Robert McCall moves to southern Italy to escape from his past, but later discovers that his new friends are under the control of the Sicilian mafia. The following events turn horrifying, where Robert unleashes his past self to protect his new friends. And then, so how is this well made? Well, in August 2018, Antoine Fuqua announced his plans to continue the film series. The filmmaker expressed interest in the plot taking place in an international setting this time, unlike the first two, which were all set in Boston. And by January 2022, a third film was officially confirmed to be in development, with Denzel Washington returning in the titular role. Then in June 2022, Dakota Fanning was announced to have been cast as well. And then by November 2022, Sonia Ben Amar, Andre Dodoro, Remy Jerome, Eugenio Mascherano, Daniel Perron, Andrea Sotosa, Gina Sotoralo were added to the cast. Then principal photography began on October 10th, 2022 at the Amalfi Coast in Italy. Filming continued in the region until November 20th, after which it moved to Naples in early December, before wrapping production by January 2023 in Rome. And Fuqua once again served as director, with Washington announcing that it would be his next movie, and Robert Richardson served as director of photography on the project, after previously working with Fuqua on Emancipation. Then, after the film was officially shot and marketed, The Equalizer 3 was officially released in theaters by Sony this weekend on September 1st, 2023, to end off the summer season. And how was it received by critics and audiences? Well, surprisingly, this received somewhat better reviews from critics than the first two films, although still not critically acclaimed. As for my reaction to this movie, well, you all know I watched and reviewed the first two films to prep for this movie. The first film I liked. The second one was sadly somewhat of a letdown, not terrible, but still somewhat of a letdown from the first film. However, this one when it comes to this one, definitely an improvement over The Equalizer 2, but I wouldn't call it as good as the first one, per se. There were some things I liked about this movie. There were some things, though, that I wish could have been done better. In all honesty. It was good, but the first film I still thought was better than this. It's definitely much better than Equalizer 2. In fact, I feel like this would have been a way better Equalizer 2 than the actual Equalizer 2. This was more of an action movie, unlike Equalizer 2, which was more of a drama. Thriller. As with the other installments in this series, we're in a completely different scenario, and this time we're in southern Italy, where Robert McCall faces off against drug smugglers. that use their income for terrorist-like endeavors. The first installment of the series introduced us to Robert McCall in Boston and how ruthless he can be. After this new teen friend of his was beaten to a pulp by the mafia in his area. The Boston Mafia. No, the Russian Mafia. And then the third installment being this one, it definitely did not disappoint. It encapsulated Denzel Washington's character. Equalizer 3 brings the trilogy to a close with the series' signature style intact. Denzel Washington once again delivers an efficient and entertaining performance as Robert McCall, the vigilante with a heart of gold. Denzel Washington as Robert McCall is definitely back in this movie. He's now decided to retire after the first two films, settles in Italy, enjoys a peaceful life, and makes some local friends. But as you would expect in an Equalizer movie, it doesn't stay quiet for long, and McCall discovers his new friends are under the control of local crime bosses, and now he wants to protect them on one last mission. So all in all, it's kind of, the concept of this plot is kind of similar to the concept almost of Rambo 4. Where in that one you had Rambo living in Thailand, catching snakes, or catching cobras or snakes for tournaments with the locals in that village he's residing in. Then he meets these new American citizens that are trying to get to Burma because they need to provide resources for those villagers. And then that village is raided and controlled by a corrupt army of ruthless mercenaries, and then Rambo has to go on his final mission to destroy that army. So all in all, almost kind of like the plot of Rambo 4. Except, unlike Rambo 4, which was set in Burma and Thailand, this one is set in Italy. A much more entertaining, well-rounded outing than the second chapter. That seems to suggest that was kind of suggesting that kind of just lost the action of the first film. It didn't really do much great for a second chapter for Robert McCall. Equalizer 3 is a bigger step yet into exploitation territory, with a grisly opening act and a procession of gory yet almost cartoonish violence that sees both Fuqua and Washington reveling the excessive of their over-the-top story that hides nothing about its true identity and wears it like a brand new hat from a clothing store. I'll get to some of the more gory stuff in a bit, but there's no doubt a film of this ilk is below someone as talented as Washington, but it's also a guilty pleasure to see such a talent performer embrace such a simplistic and uncomplicated outing, and does what it says it will in the box, and just said, well, Washington may be here teaming up with his man of fire partner Dakota Fanning as upstart government agent Emma Collins. And this is definitely very much though a Washington show, and a show he commands with a simple yet facial expression or a gun through eye. And moving the McCall action from the United States to Italy is also a strong move for Fuqua's film with the seaside set local in southern Italy, allowing for a lot of solid moments of eye candy around the cheese-riddled dialogue. The questionable friendship and romance arcs and side plots about kindly fishermen, and while there may be less action than some might expect for a film branch with the Equalizer name, when McCall gets going, he makes it worth your time. Gleefully dispatching Bond-like baddies as if his blood relative of John Wick, ensuring fans will be satiated with the carnage they are given. And the film serves as a compelling swan song for McCall, as he takes on his most personal mission yet. The action sequences are brutal and intense, they showcase McCall's ruthless skills, providing a satisfying dose of catharsis to the audience. So yeah, The Equalizer 3 rounds out this unexpected trilogy with another satisfying action thriller that wraps up the journey of a man who understands violence, trying to finally put that behind him, placing him out of his element to show quite literally how far he goes for people. The ending somewhat hinders it a little because the climax and showdown feel anticlimactic, but but the rest of the ending still works. Where Robert McCall is on his quest to finally find mating happiness, and this time around he gets to be happy, and it showed McCall actually enjoying life for once. As this is the final installment, there's obviously introspection and self-reflection as well. McCall's now in Italy, attempting to find semblance of peace after settling in a welcoming community, but it isn't long before the Mafia starts to threaten this peace, leading McCall to flex his vigilante muscles once again. And this definitely doesn't necessarily sound like an overly original story, because it's not an original story. It follows the same story beats of most one-man army type films like John Wick, Taken, etc. That's not to say the story is bad. It's perfectly serviceable and delivers what you'd expect, and it doesn't go beyond that. But the performance, though, thankfully, of Denzel Washington stops the film feeling overly generic. He once again conjures up an intriguing protagonist in Robert McCall. His ability to effortlessly switch from charm and charisma to steely and calculated is brilliant to watch. He's definitely very believable in the role, which really grounds the film. Though, kind of much like with the films in this series, the villains are definitely weak. It's definitely not a massive distraction, as they remain easy to hate, though, and don't take up too much time. But as the marketing implied that this would be McCall meeting his equal, is kind of laughable considering how little they feel like a genuine threat to him. The villains of the piece are as generic as they come, and a little more work here would have been appreciated just to add a bit more interest. And the subplot involving Fanning initially threatens to derail the film, but thankfully it ties back into the main narrative effectively, and any scene she shares with Washington is definitely great, because if you are familiar with Denzel Washington's films, both of them were in that 2004 film Man on Fire, which I liked. And it's pretty much a Man on Fire reunion. And her rapport with Washington is definitely great here, and it really feels great to see these two on screen together again after nearly 20 years after their last contribution. Fanning does give a good performance, but is a little underutilized. The story thread does feel a little underdeveloped in truth, and should have been fleshed out properly or just dropped out entirely. It's definitely nice to see her and Denzel reunite. Nearly 20 years later, also 4 when she was small. Now, 20 years later, she's now all grown up, and now pretty much her and Creasy are all reunited. So it was nice. So regardless how I feel about her plot, it was nice to see them together again. Because that was one of the best things I liked about Man of Fire, was Creasy and Peta's chemistry with one another. That was definitely one of the best things about Man on Fire. You really tell her and Creasy really liked one another lots, and it's definitely really like that. One of the best adult and kid chemistries in a film. McCall, or Roberto now, arrives in this town injured because in the beginning of the movie, he pretty much takes on this gang, but one of the gang members shoots him in the back. Then he's now in a hospital. He gets treated for this wound, and he arrives in this town with a cane now. And we spend a lot of time watching him recover, while the town slowly actually embraces him. They're not upon his arrival, they're not like, who are you? They're not rude. They don't make any of the townspeople rude. They're actually likable townspeople. They're actually normal townspeople, for once, and they immediately accept him. In those scenes, though, he still does feel like an outsider. Even when he's told they see him as one of them now, it just doesn't really feel earned in his eyes. We didn't see him do too much other than walk around and just get some tea, because since tea is what Robert McCall likes, and while in Italy, you have to be like Italians and drink coffee once, and then go back to tea. And it's hard to believe he finds peace in this little town just because of that. It's like, how is that different than the quiet life he was living when we first met him in the first movie? Or life he was living in a small apartment building working as a rideshare driver in the second movie? And while Roberto is recovering in this small town, we're introduced to Fanning's character, who's a CIA agent. Roberto gives her a tip about the location of the opening scene for the movie, where he killed a bunch of people and found something. And at some point, maybe after she had that scene, she would ask, why me? I think anyone who watched the first 2 movies would immediately know the answer to that question, even if the filmmakers want to pretend it's not obvious. And when it comes to Melissa Leo's character from the other movies, they have a flashback showing her character, in case we kind of forgot she existed, because in the first 2 movies, she was just a cameo. First one, she was just a one-scene cameo. Second one, she was just a one-scene cameo, then her ass got killed off, just to drive the plot of Equalizer 2. And honestly, with Fanning's involvement, her character just kind of investigates things, wonders who Roberto is, why he's there, but isn't really the one who discovers what's going on. So the Equalizer 3, it does get off to a slow start. Now, I still decently enjoyed the film, and by the second half of the movie, things do pick up. The plot is so predictable, there's nothing original about it, and the action scenes are well choreographed and intense, contrasting with the beautiful southern Italy backdrop to what is going on. Half of this movie just kind of shows McCall's ordinary day-to-day life in Sicily, which was to me definitely a surprising decision by Antoine Fuqua, because anybody with a brain would know that an overwhelming majority of the moviegoers for this are going to be diehard action fans, and this one probably has a bit more of that than the second one of the whole trilogy. The second one's the one that has the least. What does kind of annoy me is the fact our protagonist, our main character, just barely has a role in the plot that unfolds. He kind of starts to finish the story, but other than that, it just feels unnecessary. There's a lot of times when Fan's character just seems to have the story ticking along, and every now and then, despite the fact that her subplot doesn't really contribute much of anything, and by then, Denzel Washington's character just drops in a bit of key information to make it seem like he's majorly involved. And linking to this, like, where on earth does he even get this information from? It's actually a recurring theme throughout the series, so not just in this sequel. There's certain things that just don't have any clear explanation. Like, for example, how did he figure out the bad guy's location? It doesn't all make sense. Like, all he had to do was show us how he managed to find out these elusive details, and we would have flowed along nicely, but as a result of not doing this, it just feels like the film untimely jumps straight into the action. Speaking of the action, though, there's thankfully more action and gore than the second film, but it's not really saying much compared to that one. The action sequences are brutal and intense, and they show McCall's ruthless skills, but I that's my dose for the audience, like I've usually said, and usually with the gory stuff, the villain actually cuts off one of his assistants' hands, literally on camera, and there's quite a few brutal moments in here that I definitely do remember. The opening shootout here, guys, once again, I usually just have a bad memory of things, so I can't really remember everything all the time, so I try my best to remember as much as I can. I definitely remember the hand one, and there's a lot more. You probably might have to see the film to know more of the gore stuff, but there's a lot of goreness. It's exactly what you'd expect from an Equalizer film. The protagonist is more humane and compassionate, the action maintains its brutality, it's a journey of revenge and finding peace, and it's a fitting end to the trilogy. The pacing is good, having serene moments alongside thrilling fights without changing the vibe of the film. The sudden religious rally, though, just confused me, though. I don't know why that was really in there. It didn't have much sense to be in there. Or unless I was just missing something. And like any good script, major questions are answered as the film goes on. It's deliberately slower pace, and it lets the audience think about the dialogue and interaction between the characters in this homely neighborhood in Italy. And watching Denzel slowly recover from a wound gives us the time to figure out who he really is. You don't have pride, and and usually, and Denzel's character Robert McCall figures out like he's a good or bad guy as the people around him accept him who he is and not what his past life is. And I now remember all the gory stuff in here. There's some graphic detailed stabbings and shoots with extreme blood. A henchman actually gets a gun barrel slammed into his eye socket and impales right through his head. And it's then used to shoot the target standing behind him. And a man has his hand cut off, and he's later seen holding a bucket with his disembodied hand. And with this third Equalizer film, Antoine Fuqua and Denzel Washington return for what is hopefully the last time in this film series, because I don't think we need a fourth one after this. The second one was definitely unclear due to the lesser story, because there were too many storylines in that movie, and Equalizer also tried out different people with different things. This third Equalizer film, though, thankfully has a more focused story, because the Equalizer is more recovering. The film has a slower story, like Robert does more research into mafia cases, then he really tries to counter them right away. And this happens more towards the end of the film, and the pace suddenly picks up quickly. Despite a more focused story, the third film has a slower pace. The film was in its long-winded moments. And Robert does collect some more information for the CIA and passes on to Fanning's character McCall. Their cooperation doesn't really come forward as if they're really a mutual team. And Robert passes on the clues. The CIA only seems to catch the criminals more and make their actions more public to the world. And the isolated CIA seem a bit unnecessary. And unfortunately, the relationships that Robert has built up with various inhabitants of Ella Moore are not equally strong, and some of these relationships and characters may interest you a little less during the film, but fortunately, Denzel Washington plays the role of the Equalizer well and charismatically. Like the character, he is more elderly and recovering, and technically then Denzel Washington's approaching his 70s, so there's definitely that. And with the way the finale goes in this movie, I don't mind how it goes. Like, before we get into the finale, no, the reason why I think Emma Collins' plot doesn't really go anywhere is because during one scene, she ends up getting injured by a bomb and then ends up in the hospital just for the rest of the film. And we don't really see her again until the very end. That's also kind of why, because you could have had her play a little more in the film. I don't think we needed to have her get injured and just end up in the hospital. You could have did a little more with her character. Right there. Especially since this is their Man on Fire reunion. More could have been done with her character. And I don't mind how the finale... Now, when it comes to the finale, I don't mind how it goes here, but it has some problems that kind of bother me. I'll mention in the bad qualities. Now, around the finale, Marco and other gangsters demand that Bonnie police set up a boat for them. And overhearing them, Robert McCall decides to finally do something about this drug trade that's going on in Italy, and McCall requests them to move their operations to a different location, but Marco refuses, and McCall kills him and his henchmen. Then in Naples, his head of police is threatened by Marco's brother Vincent after he finds out the news, and now he wants to know who killed him. And Vincent had Collins' car rigged with a bomb, but she escapes kind of thanks to a warning call from McCall, and then she ends up in the hospital. Vincent later threatens to shoot Bonacitti in front of the entire town. McCall doesn't reveal himself. McCall does, but before Vincent could kill him, the citizens begin to record the ordeal. Then it causes Vincent and the rest of the Camorra to retreat frightened. Because now the townspeople are having enough of their shit and finally are now standing up to him. Standing up to Vincent after they see Vincent about to kill their own hero. Kill the town's own hero. The town's only hope left is McCall's now their only hope. McCall's technically doing something about it, so now they're on McCall's side, and now they're defending him. In return for killing Marco, and probably because he bravely was willing to turn himself in to save the head of police of that town. Then later that night, McCall kills Vincent along with his bodyguards and returns the money he had taken from the winery to an elderly couple's pension fund through Collins. And it turns out that's actually the reason why he was Italy. He was about to go retrieve a pension fund that got scammed from this elderly couple. That's why he was in Italy. Then back in Langley, Virginia, Collins is also revealed to be the daughter of McCall's friends Brian and Susan Plummer, and received a promotion for her role in ending the Alatmore drug trade. And with the Quaranta brothers dead, Alatmore is safe, and some other people overseas who were involved in the drug trade are all arrested. And so Alatmore is safe. And Robert McCall has pretty much now found peace. Because he's now celebrating with the locals, because after the team won a football game. So Robert McCall is finally able to find peace. He's finally able to retire now from his past, and he can finally live his new life in Italy with all the locals. So I do like the ending, but a part of me is mixed on the action part of it. So now we get on to the bad qualities. Like I've already mentioned, Dakota's character doesn't really get much proper character development, nor many scenes seem to be considered interesting. And honestly, I don't really buy her being this tough CIA agent because she just doesn't really look like the part at all. She doesn't really look like a tough CIA agent at all. So I don't really buy that. And the runtime being 109 minutes is refreshing, but I feel like if this was the finale, it could have been then maybe it could have been the 2-hour runtime of the others, because if you have a finale, you want to be able to flesh out more things in it and have the lead story arc come full circle in it. It was nice to be less long for once and less bloated, but it could have been like maybe 6 minutes longer, so 1 or 15 minutes long would have been fine. To flesh out, obviously, Collins and flesh out the villains. Because, like with the first one, the baddies here are just not that memorable in these movies. They're just your typical drug dealing crime lords that run a town, treated citizens like slaves, and want to rule the world with this drug, so yeah, just typical. And I just kind of hated how the action part of this whole climax goes. Because usually all Robert does in this is just kill some guards, then knocks out Vincent, drugs him with his own drug, and falls into the street where he just gets hit by a car like a cartoon, and then falls on the ground and dies just like that. It's like, come on. You want to know what I would have done had I directed this movie? After, most of the ending could still be the same, but I would change the action part. I would change how they destroy Vincent's drug trade. After Vincent sees the citizens recording him and his guards quickly retreat and go into hiding. But of course they all decide that they also want to help Robert take down Vincent and his two guards. They clearly know he's going to go finish off Vincent and his guards. And also they want to show their gratitude for saving their head of police and doing everything he did for them and killing Marco and killing one of the drug members. So they want to show their gratitude and repay their respect for him. So he plans out his little mission. Then the citizens all follow him down to Vincent's place. And then an all-out brawl would happen between the citizens and Vincent's thugs. And during that whole brawl, after like a few minutes, Robert then finally kills a whole bunch of guards, gets to Vincent. And then, of course, then after the whole skylight thing happens where he throws the thug through the skylight, then Robert and Vincent have this perfect little 4-minute brawl. No, you don't have to be like a John Wick brawl. Just be like a normal brawl. I acknowledge Denzel Washington's in his 70s now, so you could just have like a normal brawl. Like, Robert and Vincent should have had a proper final fight. Equalizer 2 is the weakest of this trilogy, but even that movie had a brawl between Robert and the big bad in that movie. So this should have been the same. Like, you could have had Robert and Vincent have this complete brutal fight. And then after like 4 minutes or 3 minutes of the fight between them, then you could have Robert knock him out and drug him. And he crawls through the street, and Robert and the citizens follow him, and the citizens could be spitting at him as he's crawling away, just spitting their disgust at him. Like yelling at him to fuck off and stuff, just booing him as he's walking to the street to his death. Then one citizen even gets his car and hits him. You can still have the car hit him and stuff. Like, this time the car hit could be on purpose, just to show their pure hatred for him. And then and even getting a few kicks as he's walking to his death. And he then collapses and dies. That's what I would have done if I had directed this movie. And if I would have made a more epic finale like that. That would have been more epic to see. That's what I would have wanted to happen for this. That would have been more epic because what we got just felt anticlimactic and too quick. Like, there could have been a little more in the finale. You could have made it a bit more exciting. And then have the rest of the ending happen. The rest of the ending could stay intact. Because I do like Robert McCall did not die in this movie. Yes! Finally! An action hero that doesn't fucking die for once. Because I'm so sick of that. He actually gets to retire in peace. He gets to have fun and celebrate with the locals of the town who are celebrating that their team won a football game. He's finally happy. He finally gets to be happy with the people of Sicilia. They now accept him as one of their own, and Robert now finally feels accepted among them. So I think Robert got a great ending. Finally, no pretentious bullshit where he dies, because that cliche is old and it's done to death now. Same goes for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Even the Guardians didn't die in that movie. yes, guys, I did see Guardians of the Galaxy 3, but before you start raging at me for choosing that, I only saw it for the actors, and the only reason I chose to see it is because I got spoiled that none of them die, so I decided to give it one time a chance. This does not mean I'm back in the MCU. This was only one exception because it was not connected to any of the multiverse shit, and there was no woke shit. So this was the only time I was making an exception, just to finally see them properly end after I saw their fates. And that none of them die, and they actually get happy endings. So that was nice. So that was the only reason I saw it. But the first two Guardians films were still better. Yeah, back to this though. Robert got a great ending. And the credits roll just like that. So please don't make a Equalizer 4, because the Equalizer 4 would probably fuck this up. This is just a nice spot for it to end. Let Equalizer 3 wrap this all up. Let Robert McCall have his piece of retirement, because this was a great thing to see finally happen. Please do not make a 4. A 4 would completely shit on this perfect ending. This is a nice spot for it. All in all, the bad qualities I mentioned don't make the movie terrible, and it's decently good, but it still has some serious problems, and it's why I still like the first one better. In the end, The Equalizer 3 is under stream online. Even though it is better than Equalizer 2, it still had some problems that were definitely a serious topic. Anyway, that's it for my review of The Equalizer 3. We're going to rank The Equalizer 3. Here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you want to see how it all ends for Robert, just wait for streaming on this one too, because while it is better than the second one, it still has some problems that are a bit bothersome. If we're going to rank The Equalizer 3, I'm going to give The Equalizer 3 a 7 out of 10. There we go! That wraps up my review for The Equalizer 3. And so, now that I finished both the Equalizer movies, our next franchise, because there's another one of these fuckers that's coming out this month. No, it's not. The Conjuring movies, I'm not reviewing those yet. It's another action franchise. 2 of these are good, 1 of these is not, and I have a feeling this one will be worse. It's the Expendables franchise. Yeah, I'll be reviewing those movies next. However, the first one and the second one, I'm happy to talk about. Not the third one. It's gonna be fun. And I can tell you not Equalizer. Expendables 4 is gonna make for a good rant when I watch it. Until then, guys, that'll be it for this review. Thank y'all for watching. If you like this one and want to see more, don't forget to subscribe to Don G. Corleone.